No pressure.
Hello, everybody. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. As Maureen says, we excuse her. She's with her family in another part of the United States. And so we will get going. We welcome everybody from around the world, literally, who's joining us live. And for those watching on replay, we would welcome you. We would always remind you to join with us every Friday night and invite your friends, your family, and to watch the replays. There's a lot of great content on here. This is the Redox 5. We're 4 in number tonight. My name is Dr. Lee Osler, and I am in the state of Washington. We have Jim and Ann Glenn from San Antonio, Texas. We affectionately refer to them as our money man and our nutrition lady. And so we welcome them to be here to give us that perspective. We have as our special guest tonight, Dr. Carolyn Hoffman. She is on the East Coast of the United States. If I remember right, is it North Carolina?
Virginia, although tonight I'm actually in Vegas.
Oh, you're in Vegas. Okay, well.
Broke away for us? Wow.
We're glad you took time out to be with us, even though you're in that place. So
Vegas.
That place.
Right. Dr.
Us.
Hoffman has an exceptional expertise on a number of things related to gut health and hormones and nutrition and diet and supplements. And so we're going to pick her brain tonight, as well as to kind of feast off her passion for our new product, Redox Gold. So we'll be looking forward to that. First thing we want to say is that we are all independent associates representing a company named ASEA Global. They are a health and wellness company that manufactures products that support cellular health, and we'll be speaking more about that. If you have sick cells, then you're not healthy. Even though you may not feel healthy, sick, you're still not healthy by that cellular definition. And so what we provide is a unique array of redox-based products that are either redox bioactive or redox bioenergetic, and they help upregulate what I call your survival and your longevity genes. So with that brief introduction and with that disclaimer, I would like to have Dr. Hoffman come on board, and there's going to be a lot of people who don't know you yet. Would you please give us a little bit of your background, and especially as you do that, kind of how you wound up being attracted to what we have here with ASEA?
Absolutely. It was my pleasure. My background is as a traditional naturopath, so I leave all the medicines to the MDs. My goal is to support the body in how it is designed to heal, and which is why this is such a perfect place to be with Redox and why it makes so much common sense to me. I am also a digestive health specialist, so primarily a lot to do with enzyme functions, which are also redox functions. And 22 or 3 or more years, I've lost count now, in this field of natural health, supporting natural health in different ways. So, I've journeyed through lots of different products, and I've always been excited to look at, what is new. I love it when we can tie a lot of science to a product that's on the market as well in the natural health field. And so I like to kind of be, where are we going with what medicine and what science is teaching us? And then how can we kind of lay that back into what we do to support ourselves naturally without drugs? My journey to finding Redox was a moment in time back in 2011 when I turned it down. So I'm sure there are lots of people who bypass it maybe the first time around, don't pay attention to it, dismiss it for all sorts of reasons. That was kind of where I was at. But interestingly enough, at that point in my life, I was diving deeply into the NRF2 pathway, which we'll talk a little bit more about in our Redox Gold connection. And as life had it, someone came past me again in 2017, shared this technology with me again, and I nearly missed it the second time. But they persuaded me to take a look, and I was really kind of just a little curious. I was lucky that at that very moment in time, Dr. David Silverman, who's been a guest on this call many times, was visiting my hometown in Charlottesville, Virginia, and actually coming to do a talk on the redox. And so I'm always interested to learn. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go. This is great. I can get in front of it and kind of learn a little bit more. And back in those days, and I say that lovingly because we're now in a different space this month or so on, we're all familiar with the fact that we would be using a topical application of the redox in the Renew 28 and using it to help people with levels of discomfort or range of motion or things like that. And so I got to watch in this event people putting this gel technology on things that hurt and watching what seemed like miraculous shifts take place and listening to lots of different stories. So I had curiosity. I was still very resistant somehow to the notion of the liquid piece, probably because of the size of the bottles. And I was just thinking practically, I don't really want to be stocking tons of those large bottles in my office. But I was curious about the gel for sure. So I went home that evening having heard some pretty amazing outcomes from people such as head coach for UVA rowing team who'd had a remarkable shift in his health, dealing with both cholesterol challenges, blood sugar issues, and watching, he was talking about, his journey and how his body had changed and was responding so well with this redox technology that, his doctor was making shifts in his medications. And that kind of caught my attention. So I went home. It was like, okay, I'm still not really certain about the liquid stuff, but, I want to try this out in my office. And so at that time, I purchased some tubes of the Renew 28. And we couldn't kind of fashion the way we placed our first orders like we can now. And so I took the smallest amount of liquid because I wasn't really on board with that at that point, but enough gel that I figured if I could see those kinds of results with my clients, I was pretty certain that they would want the Renew 28 because it was helping shift discomfort. And then I did exactly what Dr. Silverman said, was go put this on at least 10 people and, build your own belief behind it. So every time someone came into my office, I would say, if they had something that hurt, I've got this new product. Can we try it out? Can you give me feedback? Right? I wanted them to prove to me whether this was as valuable as what I had seen in that event. And my first client was someone who literally the following day was about to have a hip replacement operation. And we've been prepping her to handle that operation and the damage from anesthesia and help recovery and put her in the best place possible before that. So she was like a perfect guinea pig because I said, well, what's your level of discomfort? She said, well, it's an 8. So I said, okay, can we try this? And we applied the gel. And those of us who've been using it know that that particular one, which is very different to how we work with the gold now, which is amazing, we do it 3 times in 5 minutes. And so she applied it the first time. I was kind of prepping and doing some other things. I kind of stuck my head back in the door just to check on her because I'd given her the instructions. And I said, can you do this 3 times in the next 5 minutes? And this was no more than 2 minutes into it. And she had got off the table and she was standing there with this kind of strange look on her face. And I was like, silently, I'm thinking to myself, oh gosh, I hope there's nothing wrong. So I said, are you okay? And she kind of went, yeah. And I said, what's up? And she said, well, it feels different. And I'm sure, like so many of us, when we watch redox at work and when we watch how the body picks it up and uses it, because that's what it's doing, the body's doing the healing, there's this real skepticism, isn't there? Like, well, this seems like it's too good to be true because the body's responding so quickly. That seems like it's a placebo. You wig out your own thoughts. And so I said, well, hang on a minute. I said, you were a level 8. I said, has it changed at all? And I really didn't expect it to have changed in under 2 minutes. But she kind of cocked her head and thought about it. And she said, yeah, it's a 2. And this was my personal first experience with it. And I was so flustered because I was like, okay, what do we do with this? We haven't even done the 3 times, let alone anything. And all I knew was I wanted to be scientific about it. I wanted to replicate the same thing with everybody. So I said, well, we have to do this 3 times in 5 minutes. That's all I know. And I kind of looked at my watch and I said, it's only been 2 minutes. So I asked her to complete that. And she was at a 0 way before the 5 minutes was up. So that was my first introduction. And then every time anybody came in, I just repeated the same thing, and it really didn't make any difference whether it was, severely congested sinus challenges. Maybe it was someone who, would have a lot of head discomfort, might have been on medication, want to get in the dark, all that kind of thing when it's really severe. Somebody had a bruised toe because it was broken, who'd had an appointment with their own GP the following day for pain meds, who called me the following morning and said, well, toe's not hurting anymore and it's not black anymore either, so I cancelled my appointment. So this is my kind of intro to it. I was still very skeptical, not certain what I wanted to do with the liquid. And anyone who knows my story I was entrenched in the science. I kind of looked at the science and it was like it made common sense to me. So I started telling people about this where I felt like there was a benefit. But I wasn't using it myself, which was really kind of interesting. I was like, I don't need another thing. I've got all my other things. And as we all know, one of the challenges with this technology is, right, when you're super out of balance, what do people notice with the liquid? They notice that it can kind of taste, we think of it as taste. We know it's actually an olfactory function, but it can taste kind of funky, right, when you're out of balance. And I decided one day to try this. And I tasted it without really having read enough to really understand that side of it. I was looking at outcomes and how many different sorts of things that happen with people. It tasted funky to me. I mean, really pronounced. And I kind of walked around my kitchen saying to myself stupidly, I haven't drunk chlorinated water for 30 years. Why would I start to drink this? Right. Not realizing that this was a chloride redox molecule that I was smelling, not chlorinated water. And I actually wanted to send it back. Now, had I sent it back, of course, I wouldn't be here. But I was too lazy to take it to the mailbox and post it back. And so I tossed it at my husband. And I think a lot of us in our field do that. I've heard so many stories like that. My husband got to use it as the guinea pig. Anyone who knows my husband's story knows that for 22 years, we struggled with him in exercise-induced breathing challenges. And in that 22 years, every single thing that I'd ever come across with any real science behind it, we'd had him on those things. But we'd never really been able to help him get off assistant breathing devices. We had oxygen at one point, nebulizers, and at least 2 or 3 times a year he'd end up with the ER. I tossed these 2 cases of liquid at him with the typical amount of 4 ounces a day to start with, and just said, oh, well, you drink it. I'm not getting any more of that. I'm going to use the gel. This is great. People love the gel. And in a week or so, I could see he was moving very differently. And I was observing, but not really kind of commenting. I wanted to see, I'm sorry, guys, but most of the time, guys are not very as aware as women are about changes. So, I was just kind of see if he notices. And I did notice he really didn't seem to be going for his inhaler very much. So I said, well, I've been listening to all these stories that talk about the magic 8, as we would discuss then, the double up piece. And I said, why don't you double up? I said, who knows, you make some shifts. And he started to double up, and literally within 1 week, we had just a remarkably different person. This was like 22 years of challenges just changed so dramatically that I had to say to myself, okay, what the heck is this that I've truly got my hands on here? And then I went back and I was really diving much deeper into the science. But if that hadn't happened, I probably would not have been buying the liquid. And, the story then goes on that I finally decided to use it for myself, and a 10-year struggle that I had as a result of a car accident where not only did I have a traumatic brain injury, but I injured my ascending colon. My brain and my gut didn't talk for 10 years. And that was just a massive challenge for me to try to keep myself limping along in terms of health. But between month 3 of me drinking the product and month 9 of me drinking the product, my body walked its way back through that 10-year challenge, and I became completely free of all those other things that I needed. So
how much were you drinking at that for you? How much were you drinking?
I was only drinking about 4 ounces a day.
Okay.
My husband will drink at least 8. He will drink more than he's more diligent than I am in some ways. But I was really only, I think, doing about the 4 ounces a day at that point.
So go ahead, Lee.
I was going to say that's kind of a remarkable or a noteworthy point that you just made, that it took you a while. You know, it's a little bit like saying if this weekend, for the next 30, 60 days, I change my diet, right? And I eat differently. It's like, is this going to be like a 2-day turnaround? You know, I start eating differently, and 2 days later, I go, well, this isn't working, so I'm going to quit eating good, right?
Right.
And it's kind of that
It's like
same level.
exercising at the gym, isn't it? Same deal, right? You go for 2 days and suddenly you've got muscles, you
Yeah.
know. Or if you get them, are you going to keep them? No, I mean, and
Yeah.
you know, you're to your point, Jim. I might have had a faster recovery because my shift was nothing really in the first 3 months. I mean, I did feel mentally more alert. That I could tell, which was interesting because of the brain injury piece. More sustained energy, and I'm an energetic person anyway, but I just noticed, you know, there was no variation no matter how much during the day. But at month 3, my digestive system and my gut started to work differently intermittently. And I think it's interesting and noteworthy also of the fact that, you know, when we've had something for a long time, we don't always notice the shifts. And, you know, I would suddenly realize that my bowels were starting to do something. And then I'd be thinking to myself, well, hang on a minute, did I take X, Y, and Z? Because I mean, you know, my side table had probably 12 different supplements that I was taking religiously to keep everything moving and keep myself in a better place. And then I realized that instinctively, over periods of time, I just wasn't taking all these other supplements, and my bowels were picking up, my gut was beginning to connect. But month 3 to month 9, so there was that 6-month period of watching my body have now the capacity to connect the communication and help it do the repair that it needed to do. And so I didn't need all these other supplements. So
Carolyn, I had someone ask me this a couple of days ago. How do you distinguish between placebo and not placebo? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you know, placebo we do recognize, right? If we believe something is going to be beneficial, you know, science will show us that there tends to be a shift in. That's why we have the placebo groups, you know, in studies. I think what is fascinating about redox in the liquid, and I don't have any of the bottles because I'm in a hotel room, so I can't even show the bottles. You can show the bottles. I think what is fascinating about the studies around the redox liquid, particularly if we think of the genetic study, right? In that placebo, which was the saline, the pure saline that we begin with before it is chemically, evolves into the redox signaling molecules, there was a 0% placebo response. So genetics, you know, it didn't matter whether you thought it was going to help or not, the genetics didn't respond at all. So I think that's really kind of striking because there is this piece to, you know, nutrition as a whole.
Yeah. Anne's going to ask you a question in a sec, but I want you to go ahead and for those that are brand new, that really don't even know yet what we're talking about, what are redox signaling molecules at my level?
Yeah, okay.
Not Lee's, but mine.
Oh, I mean, they're the language of the human cell, right? It's the built-in operating system of how our cells communicate for us to be alive, for everything and anything to happen. We might think of the body as being rather like an orchestra, complex orchestra. There's all sorts of sections. And the conductor is the one that gives the instructions to keep the harmony and keep everything working. That's what our cells do. They produce these signals, these communication signals called reductants and oxidants as part of the mitochondrial and ATP, which is just production of energy in the body. And then how does the body use that energy? And it has this language that says, energy is needed over here, energy is needed over here. And it just is flipping switches on and off to say, turn this on, turn that off, make this happen, turn that off. You know, it's how our body helps us detect problems within the cells, repair and replace, which really broadly, if we think about it, whether we know much about science and anatomy and aura, it's healing, right? The innate ability to be able to detect when there's a problem and solve that problem within the cells and keep us healthy. To protect DNA replication, genetic expression, and also the ability to be really stress responsive to environmental toxins, bacteria, viruses, anything that's going to stress the system. And that, I think, is probably in many ways, the linchpin to whether, we can really stay as healthy as we need to, or maybe why we might stay healthier than somebody else. If they're not as stress resilient, then they're more likely to be susceptible to, a lot of things that go around. So essentially, it's the way our cells communicate to maintain health and vitality and to combat disease.
Right.
Awesome. Awesome. I have two quick questions. So how long did it take you when you first drank it and it tastes odd? When was the shift? Did it take you a few days, a week? Some people take longer than others to get to that homeostasis.
It's nearly
when
8
it's
years ago
tasting
now.
normal.
I think it
Just for
it
what you
wasn't
recall.
much more than about a week, I think, for
Okay.
me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which
And that can
people out
change. I
there
mean,
are,
yeah, sometimes it's a few days for people. Sometimes it's a lot longer. But you know what I think of this product? This is the second product I've ever worked with in 20 odd years. That to me is a barometer of our health, because I've seen this, and maybe other people on the call who've been using it for a while might also recognize this, right? If we're out of balance, we tend to be more conscious of the fact that it has a smell or a taste, and that can also vary, right, between all of us. Might be slightly salty for some. It was never that for me, right? It might be like a mild pool water, which is probably the most common. That's that chloride molecule. It becomes neutral really when we have a better redox potential within our body. But to go back to what Lee and I, we often talk about the stress that it is necessary to keep healthy, but if it is overwhelming, I think it's interesting to see that taste, smell can come back.
Mhm.
Right, at certain points in our life. And I think that is a beautiful alarm button signal to be able to say to us, pay attention, your redox potential is not as efficient as it needs to be to counteract whatever stress you're currently dealing with. And so I think that's what makes it unique, because we don't get that feedback from traditional supplements that come in pills and capsules. We just don't.
Yeah, over the years, we've had multiple people that called us and said, I think we got a bad batch. It really doesn't.
There
I'm
you go.
serious. It doesn't
Yeah.
taste right. I go, well, let's talk about that.
up their dose and do more. And the last question I had was related to your husband. Did he start the Renew 28 right away, or did you just focus on the liquid and then eventually do the Renew?
No, he didn't do that. He does what I tell him. So I handed him the two cases and said, here, you drink it. I'm not going to order that again. That was really where I was at. It was like, okay, it was like, why not throw it in there and see if it, it was just, let's use it up. It wasn't going to hurt. It was only going to help, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I was just
So-
curious if he had seen his own changes with Renew as well. Your clients saw it.
Yeah, I mean, and as those of us who are familiar with the Renew, which is the topical version of the same thing that we drink, right? The concentrated version of Redox. Yeah, that's been very helpful for people that are challenged with breathing. So, putting it on his chest if it's been an emergency situation, putting it over his lungs. Remind me to tell you an interesting one about the gold and lungs, which was fascinating when we get to discuss the gold. But yeah.
Let's
Awesome.
go ahead and dig into that if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Lee, can you maybe do a real quick, what is Redox Gold? If you don't mind.
Yeah, at first I'd like to just respond to something that y'all were talking about, and that is, it occurs to me once in a while that in our culture, when we get ill or sick or whatever, that one of the first things that we kind of go to is we ask the question, well, what can I take that would make me feel better, right? And that's just, and I'm okay with that. When we get sick, intervention is okay, but and this kind of gets to be a philosophical argument. It's like, well, how did you get sick in the first place, right? And could we just prevent not getting sick in the first place by better lifestyle and so on and so forth? But my point is, when we do get ill and we say, well, what can I take to fix X or Y or Z? We are immediately drawn to a product, mostly, probably 90% of the time, where we want to take something that will alleviate whatever it is we're complaining about. At the cellular level, they don't understand that language. And so if we were thinking appropriately with cell language, the question would be changed, and we'd be say, what DNA pathway do I need to activate so that my body can fix this on its own? That would be the question. And then you can
that your body's going to ask.
yeah, I mean, again, we're philosophically walking down this logic pathway, and we're saying what from the cell's point of view,
Okay.
it can heal itself if it's given, we say it can heal itself if it's given the right things. Well, the question is, what are the right things? Because there is no drug out there that produces health. Every drug out there is to make up for a difference when health fails. It's an intervention that makes up for something, but it doesn't create the conditions that would prevent the disease from occurring in the first place. And that's how you know if you're metabolically healthy. You can say, I function well, my joints don't hurt, I think straight, I can go to work. And if your neighbor said, well, are you healthy? Yeah, I'm healthy, and I take 5 medications to stay that way.
Yeah,
Well,
right.
you're not healthy. You know, metabolic health is all of those things without the assistance of medicine or intervention. So that's just my point there. And it's a little bit of, it's not really just a philosophical construct. It's really the basis upon the arena that we live and work in, which is cellular health. It's like, what gene pathways, what pathway genes do I need to activate in order to have health show up so that I don't need to take drugs? And the fact that when I do this cellular health approach and I support that cellular lifestyle, the fact that I'm doing that means I'm activating something. I'm turning something on. Now, when we morph that into your direct question of Redox Gold, you know, this just for way of explaining to people is the new product that we have at ASEA Global. And it's kind of what we call Redox 2.0 in the sense that we've had this broad spectrum in the blue bottle. Anne showed it just a minute ago. She held it up. It's a liquid. We drink it, and it affects all oxidation sensitive or redox sensitive switches. We call those transcription factors, but it's the cell switch that turns the pathway on that we were just talking about. Well, because of the way cells are designed, if I do that, I can get a broad number of them all working at the same time. It would be like saying, well, when you exercise, does it just activate one gene pathway? And the answer is no, it's making everything work better, right? So does diet and fasting and so on and so forth. But we have what we think is kind of a unique entry into the marketplace and into the cellular health spectrum, where we have a product that has gold in it, gold particles. And gold has a rich history in medicine, but it's almost always exclusively in the past been used as an ingestible or injectable or an implantable, meaning it's inside the body. And most always they are small particles, meaning they're nanoparticles, very, very small, less than 20 microns. And when they get into the body, and then that introduces concerns, it always has, with what does the body do with this gold? Pardon. And so what we've done is we've said, well, why don't we not go in the body? We're not going to swallow it or inject it or ingest it or anything. We're going to leave it on the skin and have the particles big enough that they can't penetrate. They can't transit the skin layer and get inside the body. But what they do in the redox-based gel is they so amplify or potentiate or catalyze the redox reaction that they almost like hyper-activate NRF2. And that's my word. Nobody calls it hyper. It just means it elevates it way above normal. And we now have research that documents that and shows that this NRF2 cell switch, the redox switch, is activated at a higher degree and a higher level when we combine gold in a gel topical application that goes onto the skin and then goes in and does wonderful things affecting what we call the inflammatory response. And that's the key thing. So I'm going to toss it over to Carolyn. We've got a slide up on the screen that Jim put there. Do you want to talk us through that one?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is one of the studies that they did at the University of Bath in leading us to understand what we have in our hands. You have to understand that we are the first to market with Redox. We've been in this market since 2009, and so we've had to put a lot of money into independent research to be able to teach us what we can do with our product, because there's nobody else doing what we're doing. This particular slide that you're looking at on the left-hand side shows production level. If they're taking the notion of a healthy cell and its baseline production of glutathione, that is the master antioxidant that is going to be produced within every cell. And with the use of the Redox Gold that Dr. Osler was discussing, this increased our cellular glutathione levels by 70% when we applied it to the skin. So that's huge. I mean, really being able to help the cells activate and create a much larger production of glutathione means you've got a larger capacity to combat inflammation, because that's really what the body's doing with it. But then they also took on the right-hand side and notion of the idea, well, let's take a healthy cell, let's find a way to compromise it. And so that baseline compromised cell there is really at about just around 2% of normal activation levels for producing glutathione. Here, the Redox Gold helped to reactivate the production of glutathione by 280%. So that really brought back that compromised cell to very close to the baseline of a healthy cell. That's a really kind of outstanding study result, to be honest. I'm sure you probably agree with that, Lee. And, you know, is why we are seeing these beautiful relief and recovery pathways with this new topical application, which we can use for when we've got things that are challenged with, excess oxidative stress. And we just know, if we think about disease, I mean, and what science knows about disease as a whole, and therefore compromised cells, inflammation is the result of compromised cells, and compromised cells produce inflammation, and inflammation produces compromised cells. I mean, that is just part and parcel of what goes on. So we know that as excess oxidative stress. So we've got this beautiful way to be able to apply it to something that is causing discomfort or, range of motion issues, and get very rapid relief, but not superficial. We need to say that, right? This is not an analgesic in any way. It's actually reducing that challenge that we have, but also helping, certainly with continued use, to elevate the natural recovery process within a cell.
Hey, Carolyn, can you, or maybe Lee, can you kind of dig a little bit deeper? Because we talk about relief. There's a lot of other technologies out there that talk about relief. But we also then mentioned the recovery. Why is that so critical? And there's no one else, if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but I used to be on pain meds for the back issues that I've had 10 back surgeries. And I was on one of those pain meds for 25 years, but because nothing ever got addressed. It just masked the pain. But why is this relief and then recovery such a huge deal?
Well, I don't want to upstage Carolyn there. You're going to say something?
It's okay, go ahead.
Well, relief and recovery, especially as it relates to discomfort, or, the other word that we probably are going to use less often, it starts with a P, is a function usually of inflammation. And so this inflammatory response, in what Carolyn just mentioned about this compromised cell, when cells are inflamed, they're compromised. That's the toxic stress response in a cell. And so when we have a compromised cell where there is an inflammatory response going on, and we can stop, reverse it, negate it, downregulate it, whatever word expression you want, you're going to feel better. So there's relief. You have relief from that because the inflammatory response is being subdued. Recovery has to do with the cell's ability to repair itself, to regenerate itself, to clean up the bad actors and the damaged proteins and the damaged DNA. And again, that's a function of upregulation of the DNA to do the things that it was coded or designed to do. And when you blend those together and you have what we're saying here in this, and that it's relief and recovery. And this is, we talked about Renew 28 a little bit earlier. This is different than Renew 28. It has a different response than that. We know from the thermographic studies that were done where it lowered skin temperature by, would be vasoconstriction, reducing blood flow to the surface layer of the skin. We don't really see that with Renew 28. And you could go, well, why would that be? And it's because we're more specifically targeting the inflammatory response by virtue of elevating the NRF2 to the degree that we are, and all of the attendant things, all the other inflammatory pathways that are related to that thing. If we were to get into that, we would put everybody to sleep in about 60 seconds because the biochemistry is very complex. There was somebody in the chat that asked a question about the JAK2 receptor. And it's like, yeah, we're in the right, you're in the right thing. That's a little deep for us here. But these are all parallel inflammatory responses to inflammation, to cytokines, to bacteria, to anything going on in the body or around the cell that would induce that inflammatory response. And so relief and recovery, again, we use the word targeted. I kind of like the word potentiated. It potentiates this accelerated or amplified, this magnified response that diminishes that inflammatory response. And hence we are able to induce relief and recovery.
So, asking in the chat about superoxide dismutase.
Yeah.
There was no studies done on that, although we do know from way back, right? I mean, very, very early studies of just drinking the liquid that we elevated the efficacy of glutathione and production of superoxide dismutase. So, but that's not part of what we've done with the gold.
But let me just add to that specific thing. Superoxide dismutase, superoxide is the molecule that's created in the electron transport chain when we make ATP energy. And OD, or the dismutase, is what the biologists call it. It dismutases it, or it subdues it like 50%-ish. Is by it halves it dramatically, because superoxide is a very highly energetic, damaging molecule. And so superoxide dismutase and catalase are antioxidants that are used to help diminish the presence of those free radicals that are created when we make energy. To make catalase requires NRF2 activation. We just never measured catalase specifically. So some of these are like markers. If glutathione goes up, then you can assume that catalase went up, that superoxide dismutase goes up, because they're all created by the same NRF2 pathway gene pathway.
So this is the part that people find hard to understand, because Lee, you refer to the inner doctor, and the inner doctor knows how to fix you. And it doesn't matter what it needs to alter, it's going to alter it. And that's really difficult for people to understand, that there's one, and I keep focusing people to realredoxresults.com. There's 156, probably 500 plus testimonials there, because some people have, like Phyllis Lane has like 7 or 8 or 10 different testimonials, and each one of them is amazing. That is what people have a hard time understanding, that one single breakthrough that one man gave us over 15 years ago can do this. It's real. Again, I'm an ex-stockbroker. That is so difficult to wrap your head around that people have a hard time with that. Carolyn, when you were back in the beginning, was it just getting Paul to use it and then you had someone else use it? Was it just, or did you dig into the science, or was it just your experiences that got you to look more into the science?
Well, in the very beginning, I mean, I looked enough at the science, like it made common sense to me, but I'm very much of the person that I've worked with other products products in the past that have had a lot of science thrown at me, right? And then in practice, I haven't seen the outcome with the clients. And so while I want to see the science, and that's nice, I'm still much more bedded into, does it actually translate into something, from client to client? So I was trying it with people because it made common sense to me. And I will back into the fact that, I've spent all of my life in the physical nutrition, and this is not physical, right? These are not physical materials, right? Then that's the challenge that people have also, is that when we're taking supplements that comes in capsules and pill form, they have physical materials that have to be broken down, digested, assimilated, and delivered out to cell membranes. And that there's a huge gap between what you put in your mouth and whether it gets to the cells, right? Because you've got the stomach and all the other challenges in between and multiple functions. So just because you take a good supplement doesn't mean it gets delivered. It doesn't matter how good it is, because there's this huge variable that goes on. So I was always frustrated because I would feel very often like, for clients, how many people know that they're taking 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 supplements, and people would come in for testing on their supplements, and sometimes I'd have them bring in 2 carrier bags full. We'd have 30 to 40 supplements, and to be honest, guys, if you're taking that many, you're overloading the system, right? And the reason you're overloading the system is because you don't have the energy within the cell, the redox potential, to actually help the body do enough with it. So you're causing more toxicity. And in my experience, the less is more, not more is better. But I was still frustrated with, wouldn't it be wonderful to find one thing that could activate across the whole thing? Because if we think about those physical supplements, we'll take one thing for the liver, we'll take one thing for the heart, we'll take one thing for the adrenals, we'll take one, it goes on and on. Everybody can tell you that they've got all these supplements. And I was in that space. I mean, I was doing it for me, to keep me going. I knew there was benefit to them, but trying to find where's the key that unlocks a much larger potential of health, it wasn't in that space. So I was fascinated by the principle of what was going on here. I was interested first to see, in some respects, what would this do for people? When I tossed this at my husband, it wasn't with great expectation that would be some miraculous, unfolding. And so when it was so pronounced, I was like, okay, I need to understand, how is this one thing making all this happen in such a short period of time? So now I got the books out, right? And I was trying to go through, and as Lee knows, he loves this, it's much more your field than mine, but I mean, it's a deep, deep field of biology and chemistry. And I was trying to rack my brain with some resistance in there, like, do I really need this product? Is it any better than something else I've got? How is it different from energy medicine that I use? How is it different from homeopathy? It's none of those things. And once I got deeper into it, the phrase that I've used since 2017 is, I wonder if this is the missing link. That was the question that came in my mind, because I had a client that I wasn't yet seeing who'd had 3 separate autoimmune issues and been more or less bedridden for 30 years as a result of it. Very common on the East Coast of America with the little animals that walk around. She had every problem known to that condition. And she had seen multiple doctors, trained MDs in those fields, specialists, every other alternative, spent a lot of money, hadn't got anywhere, couldn't work, didn't have a life. And she had been referred to me by another client, but she was still taking some things. And I said, finish what you're doing first, and then come see me afterwards. I don't want to get into the space where you're taking other products. Otherwise, we won't really know what's working. But as I read this, she came to mind. And I kept thinking, I wonder if this is the missing link. I wonder if we put this piece in, because it's not materials, it's not vitamins, I know it produces antioxidants, but it's not vitamins, it's not minerals, it's not CBDs, it's not homeopathy, it's not essential oils, fancy juices, any of those things. But it's how the cells communicate within themselves and between themselves. And I thought, I wonder if this is the missing link, that if whatever she is taking if you power up that communication, would it suddenly lock everything in and push them through the barrier that we often see, where we can't quite get to where we want to get to? And I called her up. I have no clue. I guess it's God divine, I mean, why do we make decisions to do things? But I called her up and I said, look, I'm deep into this book on redox biology. And I was honest with her. I said, I don't even know that I fully wrapped my brain around what this really is at this point. I said, I'm wondering if it's the missing link. I said, and I'm wondering if this was something you did, whether it would be the thing that pushes you through the barrier of where you're stuck. And maybe we'll make this matter the difference for you. And I said, if it does what I think it will do, I think that could be potentially what will happen. And I said, but it's up to you. I said, you can come see me. But I said, what I would say is, like, instead of spending money on an appointment with me and whatever we do, why don't you take that, try this for 3 months? And 3 months is a critical minimum, right? Because the body takes its time to heal, and really 4 months and 6 months is going to be even better. But take it for 3 months, I said, and see. I said, if it does what I think, you might not need me. 30 days later, this woman had a 90% shift in her health. And I went, what the heck have I got my hands on? No, I have got to understand why this can make such a change. And it does dial down to that thing that we often talk about, right? We've got 70 to 120 trillion cells, right? If every cell was responsive, as Lee is talking about, if it was able to flex with whatever's put at it, dart, bounce, repair, get back in homeostasis, in balance again, we would constantly be healthy and optimal. But when things start to dial down and we don't have the energy within the cells to respond to all of the stresses and overcome the damage that's happening and the oxidative stress, and delete old cells and replace them with nice new healthy ones, and stop the ones that keep marching around communicating with other ones and causing more trouble, right? When the body gets out of balance. And, it's interesting. There's a study in Free Radical Biology 2016 that to me says it all about why everybody needs to be doing this if it makes common sense. And it says, redox homeostasis changes with aging. And we know that, right? We know that we start to lose this at 1% per year from puberty, right? Aging is not in our 40s, all right, in our 50s, right? It's already starting before we're even thinking about it. We think we're nice and young, but it's already turning down. And we don't feel the impact. It's rather like, how many times do we fill our car tank up with gas, right? And we're over the full marker, all right? And we drive for quite a while and it stays over the full marker, and then it suddenly starts to drop after a while. Well, we've burnt miles up, and that's kind of like the beginning of the loss of redox. But this study said redox changes with aging. It is essential for homeostasis or health. And the more sustained deviation from balance, redox balance, the more diseases we have. And I was like, okay, nothing more needs to be said. This is up there with water, food, sleep, nutrition, exercise, all the other things we do. It is essential, because if we don't have cellular communication, it doesn't matter about the rest of the stuff. It's not going to work.
So you calling this the missing link then?
Oh, yeah.
That was my first phrase in 2017, and it's proven to be that to me. I mean, I thought of it as the missing link for the first 18 months. In other words, if you add this in, whatever else you're doing will work better. That is the truth. However, 18 months on, I went, you know what? This is the foundation of the house. You got to have this in place. It doesn't matter about the rest of it. This has to be in place first. And if you think of health or lack of health as we often experience it, because we come to these things trying to find solutions, it's like a muddy pond, right? You get your redox potential elevated, it kind of cleans the pond out. Then you can kind of see if there's a few stones under there that need something specific, and that's where the nutrition sits. Right? They're a partnership. You can't have one, you got to have decent nutrition. You got to have, and that's where it comes back to. I mean, the fact is, health is in every decision we make in our life. We're in the driver's seat.
Wow.
Every choice we make is where it sits.
I agree. Yeah, and what's neat about our vitamins being whole food, they're 100% absorption. So they're synergetically working those that are new, if you haven't tried them, they work with the redox molecules. And like you said, they don't need those bottles and bottles. But I was saving my comment related to the chart. I think it's neat that the glutathione, the super duper antioxidant, that we're able to get the native production increase and not have to do like some people are doing it, maybe a shot. They're doing a synthetic pill form when they can get it. Just take more redox signaling molecules. If you're only on 4, maybe consider 6. If you're only on 6 and you're not seeing the shift, up it to 8, and you'd be surprised. But I'm eager to hear, with the time that's left, about your gold story you had earlier you were saving, and I want to make sure we allow enough time before Danny Doyle.
Danny's not on tonight.
Oh, no, on. Well, even better. He's not
traveling.
on. So share your story before you have to go back to Vegas.
And anything else that you want to share about the gold?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've had this beauty of working with Renew 28 for discomfort and all this time, but I mean, this is just, as we call it, so rapid that I think in some respects it's another one of those moments, those redox moments when we watch how fast the body uses something that is essential and puts it to work. We get this brilliant opportunity to see how quickly the body can do something, right, when it's actually doing what it knows how to do. And so it is very rapid for a lot of people. We've seen some, I'm sure, just like you have, some really breathtaking shifts for people that are like unbelievable. But we do have to realize, right, if we've got a lot of oxidative stress and damage, then there's still a healing potential that needs to happen. And it's not just a one and done. That's going to depend on whatever's going on with each individual. So the one beauty about this product in some respects, and the challenge, is that it's unique for each of us, right? Every single person's going to find, I think of this as the sleep number bed, right? We find what's perfect for us in our deficiencies. We had an interesting experience. So unfortunately, after our trip to Salt Lake, all right, we were traveling around. My husband ended up getting pneumonia and ended up in the hospital. But here was interesting, right? So they have him on all of the oxygen machines and they're checking all the time, what's going on with him. And we were changing gowns and doing things. So in that moment, it was an opportunity to put some gold on him because we had it there. And so I'm applying it to the whole of his back, over all of his lungs. And the OT was standing actually in the room. We were kind of behind the door, so she didn't see what we were doing. But he was lined up onto his, machines on the side so they could see what his OSAT2 levels were and all the rest of it. And I'm applying the Redox Gold, and the numbers changed on the screen dramatically.
That's awesome.
And she said, what did you just do? And it was like we weren't paying attention to what she was doing because his oxygen levels had been like 80, 89, and they suddenly went up to 94 in a matter of seconds. So it was really kind of interesting. It was like, oh, okay, well, we just put this gel on. That was all I did. I don't know. So I have, I'm not saying that's, it's going to cause that to happen to everybody. It was just an interesting one to see somebody who knew all about oxygen breathing and challenges that were going on, and then to be able to see something happen. I was like, okay, that'll be interesting. I wonder if, we didn't get to repeat it and have another go on it, unfortunately, but I would love to kind of play with that, be like my little test to see what would happen. But, again, I guess if we are impacting the things that cause a lot of, if there was a lot of inflammation within his lungs, which clearly there would be if what he was going on, were we able to support the body in doing something about it very quickly? I don't know. It was kind of interesting response.
And we have heard that rubbing it in and creating some friction is also important, right?
Yes, with this one, very much so, because what we understand is that actually massaging it in activates with the gold that's in there. It helps to activate that redox function. So this is not just put it on. I don't know about you, but I would always encourage people not to rub in the Renew 28 because I didn't want it to be working on their hands. I wanted it to work on wherever it was being put on. This one is different, so we do massage it in. It's a thicker consistency as well. I'm sure you've all seen the same thing definitely thicker than the other one. We don't shake it if you've got the Renew 28 because it tends to separate when it sits because there's a minimum amount of silica in there to support the liquid, which is identical. That, is the same liquid that we're drinking in the Renew 28. Formulation is slightly different in the Redox. I think of it as like a recipe, right? The recipe, the structure of what they've chosen for the redox molecules is slightly different in its formulation than the Renew 28. So they're not identical by any means.
Yeah, and the dries fast, which is nice. The gold dries fast once you put it on. You mentioned about your husband's back. We've got a yoga instructor that gave us a whole chart of where to put gold. And of course, it's neck, spine. And it's no surprise that it's doing the things that it's doing. He's seen remarkable stuff with people he works with in yoga just by applying gold to the neck all the way down, like you did in the spine.
Yeah, Lee, real quick, add in the disclaimer.
Yeah, you're reading my mind. We are a cellular health company, and we do not make any claims to diagnose, treat, or cure. This is about cellular health. We had some discussion earlier about links, the missing link. I like to say this is the missing pathway. And I like to use the word upstream because that's congruent with the idea of a pathway. If we get up to the top or the fountainhead, of the river where the spring is, as it were, the very upstream extent of it where things start, if we get that corrected, then all the downstream things that flow from that work better. And it doesn't take the place of vitamins. It doesn't take the place of nutrients. It doesn't take the place of lifestyle. It just activates the pathways upon which all of those operate and function. I would like to say one thing also, because Carolyn mentioned that people would come in with their bags of their nutritional supplements and whatnot. We do have this mindset, in our culture that if a little is good, a lot is better. And I can remember, in the 70s and 80s and 90s, people would be, I'd go to meetings and these anti-aging physicians would hold their hand out and say, this is how many you need every day. And it's like, well, that was before, this is now later. We have new science that reveals that that's not a good idea. Why? Because strength doesn't come from comfort, it comes from slight challenge. That's why we fast. That's why we exercise. That's why we intermittent fast. That's why we might keto periodically. That's why we do all these things, right? Because all we did was we said, I just want to stay in balance in perpetuity. Forever, I don't want to alter, rock my boat, get out of kilter. I just want to stay balanced. If that were possible, you would not be healthy. It takes a little bit of stress to upregulate these redox switches that will turn the adaptive stress response on so that we can be fit and resilient. That's the whole point of this. And what we have with redox supplementation is the ability to induce a mild amount, we call it hormesis, of stress in the cell so that it thinks, hey, if I don't fix this, I'm going to die. I need to mount a response to this so that I can be fit and resilient. And the more practiced and exercised my cells are at doing that, the more metabolically fit and responsive I am. And that's the whole principle. And so the point with the mega dosing is that if I take too much antioxidants, then I'm suppressing the environment that creates a slight bit of oxidation. I'm actually causing reductive stress, not oxidative stress. And so when I shift the pendulum too far and I reduce the very environment that my cell requires to activate the inner healer or the inner doctor, then I haven't done myself any favors. And so, and I'm going to say that from an ongoing basis. Now, if I get sick, like right now, I've got a slight cold going on. And so guess what? For 2 or 3 days here, I'm pumping up the vitamin C and things because I have a challenge, right? But if I did that every day, my cells would get lazy. They would become reduced, and I wouldn't be able to call on them when they hit natural threats. So
And make sure that you can say, Carolyn, that we'll always need the blue bottle and the white tube. The Redox Gold will never replace what your body needs to do all the repair work is the blue bottle and the white tube, correct?
Of course.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we often talk about, activating all the piano keys on the keyboard, right? And
Right.
it's a broad spectrum, right? Which is why sometimes we get frustrated that we can't target it to just one thing, because we've got something in mind, but the body decides where to direct the need. So it's broad spectrum. It's going to activate and raise the redox potential in every cell with the liquid, which is our powerhouse internally, and with the Renew 28, and then target if you've got something with the gold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we're at the top of the hour. We're a little bit beyond, and we could go on for multiple hours with you. We didn't even really get into the nutrition with you and Ann. We need to get you back, and also cell performance and how all these things work together to make the body work the way the body was made to work, which is pure and clean without doing any damage. And so that's why this is such an unusual offering as such an unusual company. And next week, just so you know, we do have Jerem Webb, who is our CEO. So this will be a really good, timely time to bring people back and hear about the company. The leadership of this company is absolutely remarkable. So Jerem Webb, who has been here from the beginning with our original founder, Vertus Norton, will be with us next Friday at 7 o'clock Central, 8 o'clock Eastern, and wherever you are, adjust. So, guys, Danny Doyle will be back next Friday, from what I understand. And with that, Carolyn Hoffman, thank you so much. Do not have too much fun in Vegas. You know what they say, don't, make sure you can go home.
Don't share.
Yeah.
Don't tell us.
Yeah, I'm not gonna touch that one with a 10-foot pole. So, Lee, pray you feel better. Drink more Redox, rub more gel on, it'll make you feel better.
Yeah.
Carolyn, thank you. God bless y'all. Come back next week and visit with us about who our senior leadership is, and learn more about that as well. So, guys, thank you. The recording will be up within the hour or so at redoxmatters.com on the video tab. So, guys, thank you. God bless. We'll see y'all soon.
Thanks, Lee. Have a great
Thank y'all.
weekend. Bye, y'all.
Oh,
Good night.
happy birthday to my wife. Tomorrow is her little birthday.
Thank y'all.
So
Appreciate you.
happy birthday, Ann.
Thanks. Bye,
Thank you,
everybody.
guys. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.